Hi, I'm Dan Costa, editor-in-chief of PCMag.com, and welcome to Fast Forward, where we have ongoing conversations about living in the future. This is a special Fast Forward from South by Southwest 2019, and my guest today is Josh Schwartz. He is an in-house security expert at Verizon Media, and basically he spends his days trying to hack into his employer's most valuable and trusted systems for the benefit of that employer, of course. We're going to talk about how that works, how popular it makes him around the office, and how we can be safer in this increasingly connected world. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me.
So you operate a red team inside of Verizon. When we see, I think people have a vague idea of what red teams are. They've seen them in movies. Is it as fun and exciting as it looks on TV?
I only wish, right? I mean, it is. It's having the responsibility of breaking in and getting to places. Of course, it's quite exciting, but it's obviously, in the movies, you see everything happening instantaneously, and in reality, it doesn't, right? It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of care intending to make sure that the outcomes you get from hacking stuff, it's not just running around causing pranks. It's actually trying to affect change within an organization, trying to help inform the organization about what do the bad guys really do. So this role of being on an internal red team is, while it's still exciting, I still have to go to meetings, I still have to set goals, things like that. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it's great, of course.
So who are the individuals on this team? I mean, I imagine there are a lot of programmers, but I imagine it's not just limited to programmers.
Right. I mean, in a big way, diversity of the skill set on team is something that if we don't have that capability, because there's a misconception very frequently. It's that, because what you see in the movies is there's one hacker guy, and he can solve any technological problem.
And there's the car guy,
right?
The weapons specialist.
But really, in reality, it's, I build the team so that each person is kind of an expert at something, right? This guy is the guy who knows how to do physical intrusion, and someone else is an expert at cryptography, and someone else is an expert at social engineering. And having each person be an expert means that we can lean on each other to effectively get that can solve any problem type of team. So
what does a day at the office look like? What are types of things are you testing?
So the way red teaming works, unlike in movies maybe where you're just they're hacking anything maybe. The idea that hackers are kind of inherently bad, of course, is wrong. So being a hacker is just kind of being someone who likes to take systems apart, right? That's the reason that we're not inherently criminal just by being a hacker. So a day in the office, we set goals based on outcomes we want to, kind of like worst case scenarios that we want to see. What is the steps for us to go from nothing to achieving this goal that is really bad for the company, so that we can form something called a kill chain, the steps that it takes to get there. And the day in the office is figuring out how to make that chain happen, and then thinking about what are the different places where we can break that, and then going to meetings with relevant stakeholders and helping inform them on here's how the attackers would do it, and here's one little change you can make to help fix that.
So what are the vectors that you're most concerned about? I mean, I know I'm still getting emails from IT telling people not to click on links attached in emails or email attachments. I mean, where do you see the vulnerabilities that are still out there?
I mean, if you're clicking on links and downloading attachments and running them on your computer, despite the many warnings you're probably going to see, that's probably still a problem. But we've sort of evolved into a new era where now it's access to information that exists in the cloud in different places, and if you are authorizing access to something else, that ends up being quite more problematic than something running on your computer, because there's a lot of protections around that. And now we have information that's floating out there everywhere, and you have agency to control it. You have agency to grant other things access to it. It's kind of how the internet works now. So attackers, and us included, have shifted towards things like that a little bit more.
It's pretty extraordinary, even looking at my own Google Drive and how many files I have access to, that the owners of those files, I couldn't get into my Twitter account this morning, and I'm like, oh, I'm interviewing Josh today. Is he screwing with me?
No, I'm not, because you're not paying me.
That's right. Yeah. But I know the owners of these documents don't know that I have access just because of my corporate email address, and they gave access to anybody with the link. And somehow I got the link, and I know there's at least a dozen files like that. And I imagine it's much worse in companies that are not as technologically sophisticated as Ziff Davis and PC Magazine. But yeah, I mean, it's not just files running malware, but it could be corporate documents, it could be financial documents that you just really don't want your competitors to have, or end users, or criminals.
Right. I mean, security in general, it's this holistic system. It's not about, is there a bug in the system where I'm going to throw some exploit at it and it's going to explode or something like that. It doesn't work like that anymore. It's interconnected systems, people, business processes, the technology that supports them, how we feel about it, policy, like everything together forms what is security. And security often is just kind of how you feel about it, how you feel about the data and the information, and then the steps you take to protect it. And if you feel really strongly about it and the efforts that you put in are less than the efforts of the forces around you trying to get it, then you're insecure. But if you feel like you're putting in enough effort and nothing bad happens, then you feel secure. But there is no on-off switch for security.
Let's talk a little bit about the nature of those threats. It seems to me there's a couple of buckets that people worry about. Hacking used to be, or security threats used to be a sort of a playful thing that people did to get access to your computer or crash your computer. Then it became criminalized, and criminals figured out how to make money using these different techniques. But there's also state actors and even private companies that have enormous amounts of data on people. Where do you see the threats? Like, where do you think the biggest unseen threats are in the security space?
I mean, figuring out where the biggest threat is ends up being figuring out who you are, right? Because the biggest threat to you probably isn't the biggest threat to me, which isn't the biggest threat to some company somewhere. So in its essence, it's kind of all about threat modeling, right? So you don't just pick a biggest threat and point to them. You think, what is it that I have? Who might want it? What should I be doing about it? And try and take actions to mitigate the things that you don't want to happen. So I think in its essence, just trying to point to this nation is the biggest threat, or this company is the biggest threat, is something that gets us into a little bit of a trap, where we start building the threat model all about this thing, and while we're so focused on this one little thing, the world around us changes, and then we get blindsided somewhere down the line.
We've had a lot of companies that have had these massive data breaches, and most of them are because of lax security or just bad habits. Equifax doxed millions of Americans, but there was really no consequence. They're going to pay a fine, but all their executives got bonuses, and it seems to me there's no the consequences for poor security are pretty lax in corporate America. Is that your sense as well, or do you think that there needs to be some kind of change in terms of accountability? Because I feel like we keep seeing the story over and over again, and it never changes because the consequences aren't severe enough.
Yeah. Well, I'm a guy who breaks into computers, not a public policy maker, so I don't really know. Maybe that would change things. Likely there would be changes, but at its fundamental level, thinking that one change somewhere changes everything and that there's no longer any problems, I think is a little bit short-sighted. It's about how everything works together. It's how we care about it as the public. It's how businesses care about it. It's one piece of it, but it's not the whole solution, of course. And I mean, I think one of the big things that we need as technology practitioners or consumers of technology need to think about is that security isn't someone's job off in an ivory tower to flip the right switch and make everything perfect. It's sort of the more educated we are as public, as consumers, as producers of content, of technology, media, things like that, the more educated we are and the more we understand the big picture of security, the more small changes and behaviors that we can take that help kind of make everything a bit more secure, a bit more safe for everybody. But yeah.
Is there anything what is your personal security habits like? Like, do you use a VPN? Do you use off-the-shelf commercial malware detection?
Comes back to the threat model, right? Depends what I'm doing at the time. So, if I don't want to, like a VPN, while it does protect you from some things, like connecting to a VPN doesn't protect you from viruses, essentially. connecting to a VPN protects you from seeing, like, it essentially changes where you are in the world. And sometimes that can be useful if you need it. It puts your traffic inside a little tunnel, and that tunnel takes you somewhere else, and the traffic comes out in some other place. So a VPN is useful if where you are is a little bit unsafe, or you don't want someone to know where you're at. Two main uses for a VPN, but the idea that I'm connected to a VPN and now I'm safe on the internet, not so true. Right. For me personally, I think the biggest thing's probably, like, password managers are a bit of a new thing that I think if more people did, they'd be in a much better place. Because one of the main attacks that we use is, like, there's been all these breaches, right? You're quite familiar with them. So as an offensive adversary, like, those aren't private. Everything that's been leaked is out there on the internet. We can curate a big list of everything and look for passwords and see what passwords you've used before. And then if I'm trying to get access to something you have, if I can go find the password you used before, I know a little bit about you. And I can take that information and try and reuse it or try and guess what your next password might be. So using a password manager and making every password super unique for every site that you visit is actually something that is good. And it takes the load off of the human brain a little bit, and then you really only have to protect it in one place, which makes security a lot simpler.
Yeah, we were big fans of password managers at PCMag. I've been using LastPass for almost 10 years. And once you get over that leap of, like, I actually don't know what any of my passwords are, I only know one. And it's hard to get there, but once you do it, it's such a relief. And you can access it anywhere. You can access it on your phone. Super effective. It reminds me too that we've sort of forgot about the Yahoo breach, which leaked lots of usernames and passwords. But it was years ago, and nobody really cared about Yahoo anymore. But the value of that hack and the value to cyber criminals is that a lot of people still use those passwords that they used on Yahoo 10 years ago. They still use them today, and and you can look up what all those passwords are. Is what you're saying?
It comes down to human behavior, right? It comes down to the fact that you have habits as a human, and as an attacker, that's often what I'm looking to exploit. It's not the technology. I mean, the technology will continue to get better and will continue to increase in the security and become more secure because we have this need for it, right? That drives business forward. But human behavior is something that it's kind of our responsibility to change. And if we're not changing our habits and making ourselves be more secure, there's no technology that can protect us from anything.
Are there other habits other than a password manager that you think consumers are going to need to adopt, especially as we're moving into an age of Internet of Things and everything is so much more connected?
So if you think about it, it's no longer just your computer, right? It's devices all over the place, and certain habits on, maybe you think your phone isn't that important, but the password that you put on the phone essentially is your password there. Right? I mean, and the phone has access to many of the same things that your computer might have access to. So thinking about everything that you touch that interacts with all the data that you would want to protect, and making sure that you treat it just as sensitively as your laptop or your desktop or the computer at work or whatever it is. But of course, I mean,
we were talking, I had a couple of people at RSA last week, and they interviewed some NSA executives, and they said, regardless of the encryption of the phone, they can access most phones because people still don't lock their phones. There are a lot of people that don't lock their phones at all, and they don't need any encryption to crack that. That's just pure user behavior.
Yeah, and or the password's like all zeros or all ones or something like that. Yeah, there's always this idea that if as technologies advance and as your password becomes more things, like your fingerprint or your face or something like that, there'll always be some attack or some way around it. Like, I just need to find you and point your phone at your face, or I need to cut off your finger and put that on your phone.
Also seen in many movies.
Yeah, but we're not doing that these days, which is good.
You run out of team members really quickly that way.
And fingers. Yeah. Makes it hard to type.
Yeah, they can work on 10 projects, and then that's the end of that. So tell me, in terms of what you do, how much of it what's the balance between the social engineering and the technical hacking? Is that mix changing over time?
I mean, social engineering has always been my bread and butter. It's the path of least resistance very often. I'd say it's a mix. A lot of it's recon, trying to figure out what really exists out there. But it's interesting, like the social engineering aspect, it isn't just in the offensive world, right? If you think about how an internal red team exists inside a company, what we do is we do some of the technical hacking, and we use social engineering and physical and everything combined to try and execute that kill chain, accomplish the mission. But then afterwards, if you think about what security is trying to do, is we're trying to social engineer everyone at scale to have better habits for the greater good. So a lot of times it's the telling of the story of what we did and educating people inside the company of here's how it works, here's what you can do to be better. I mean, that's social engineering. So really, like, the big part of the job is social engineering, because it's getting people to care about security in the right ways, make the right choices, hopefully care about the right things.
I kind of imagine that, like, when people get emails from you, that they don't want to respond. Like, if you ask for something, I got to imagine the first answer is no.
It used to be the red teams have gone through a bit of a metamorphosis over the past decade, and there's been a while where you kind of start off in this place where you're extremely adversarial, extremely offensive, trying to like beat the drum and let everybody know that security is important. And in those days, people see you as an adversary because, well, that's your job. And I've had experiences personally where it's like I get into the elevator and people are like, oh, I don't want to go to my floor because red team's here. And I'm like, I'm not the real bad guy, you know? And that's changed over time, because in the end, it's really, we're all working towards the same goal: protect information, protect our consumers. So as we work together and as we share information about what we've done as adversaries, that sort of fuses, and they see us as an ally and a friend. But it's taken some time to get there. But I am seeing it trend in the right direction, so it's good.
Great. I'm going to ask you a couple questions I ask everybody that comes on the show. Is there a technology trend that concerns you, that's something that keeps you up at night?
It keeps me up at night. Perhaps the ubiquity and comfort that we get with all the technology around us. Not so much that it keeps. Actually, the real answer is nothing keeps me up at night, man.
You sleep well.
I see the worst stuff, and it comes down to like risk acceptance, where I'm like, okay, I know what the world is like, I know what's possible, and I'm going to be okay with it. I know that technology is going to be infused into my life everywhere, and I'm going to make the choice to be okay with it, but I'm going to operate in a way that I understand that, and I sleep like a baby. So.
All right. Is there a technology that you use every day, or a tool or service that inspires wonder?
Well, it's not my cell phone, but honestly, there's a lot of things that are up and coming that I wonder about, and I mostly feel impatient. I wish they would get here quicker. I'm excited about the future of AI, the future of machine learning, and things that will hopefully give us a more connected world. Mostly I'm just waiting for it. But nothing really surprises me too much, I think.
So how can people follow what you're doing, what you're allowed to tell people publicly? How can they find you online?
I go by the moniker Fuzzy Nop, N-O-P at the end everywhere, so people can find me there anywhere.
Very good. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks.
You bet. That's Fast Forward for today. If you want to see past episodes of Fast Forward, you can find them on PCMag.com, on iTunes, Google Podcasts, anywhere fine podcasts are given away for free. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll see you in the future.